Hello everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum's Artifact Video Series. My name is Ryan Duffy, I'm the director of the museum, and this week we're going to talk about a landmark here in Genesee County, but one that had many different roles and offered many different things to different people throughout its time here in Genesee County, and that is the Seven Springs Country Club, located just outside of Batavia, in between Batavia and Stafford, in the Seven Springs area, which it gets its name. And it's been an area with deep meaning going all the way back to the Native American cultures of the area, and has gone through many transitions here in the 19th and 20th centuries, especially with the expansion of settlement here in Genesee County. So we're going to go through the history of the area and the country club itself, which became a community living in the Seven Springs area, which devoted to many different aspects of that area. So we're going to go through the history, show you some pictures, and much of the information that I'll be sharing today comes from a book called Seven Springs Country Club, written by a resident there, Mary Ellen Reardon, and she also graciously offered many of the photos that you'll see in this video. So we're going to talk more about the Seven Springs Country Club and its impact here in Genesee County. Now, the history of the Seven Springs area, at least in recorded history, can go back all the way to 1804 when John Dabo and Zenas Bigelow began cultivating the land in that area. And this is how Bigelow Creek, which is one of the creeks in the area, got its name. In 1811, a sawmill was built in the area by Amos Stowe on Bigelow Creek, and a grist mill was built by Seymour Ensign on his pond, which was in the same area, named Ensign Pond. And this later became known as Gardner's Pond. But we're going to jump ahead about 100 years to the beginning of what we know as the Seven Springs Country Club. So in 1910, William Billy Russell purchased a tract of 55 acres on the border of Batavia and Stafford. It was an area that his father Edward had long admired, and an additional 2.5 acres were soon purchased from a nearby farmer, Jerome Whittleton. And it was at the same time that a group of businessmen and members of the County Fish and Game Association came together to create the Seven Springs Country Club. The club was established to be a place of recreation and enjoyment for its members. No hunting was allowed on the grounds, but people were allowed to fish, members of the club, that is. The organization began to take form with the 28 charter members in that same year. In December of 1910, the club approved a mortgage in order to about $1,500 so they could start to build their club. Articles of incorporation were also issued by the Secretary of State in the following year, and it was formed in order to establish and maintain a country club for intellectual improvement, social intercourse, and sport and recreation. In March of 1911, Edward Russell was named as first president, C.A. Wilyoung was the treasurer, and J.B. Jones was named the secretary. Board of directors was also created with 9 members. The club was capitalized at $5,000 of 50 shares at $100 each in order to buy into the country club. And that first year there were 48 members. As it was first limited to 50, but by the end of the year they had to increase it to 100 due to the amount of people looking to join. Edward Russell and Cleve Gillette set up camp on the area and spent the winter of 1911 living on the property in tent in order to help clear the land a little bit and make room for some of the improvements that they were looking to do. Russell would then go on and build a cottage on the first couple of years after that and used it when he was staying at the Springs. And this was known as the Caretaker's Cottage, and today is known as the Yellow Cottage at the head of the lake there in Seven Springs. In 1912, the dam was completed and a 5-acre lake was formed. Trees were planted that first year did not do well, and no more were planted until 1913, but these trees did very well and grew numerous. And from that time on, new trees were planted just about every year. By 1914, cottages were beginning to be built by the members of the country club. They were small, consisting of usually 1 or 2 rooms. They did not have running water or electricity, and were basically summer retreats as people weren't living there year-round yet. By February 1914, William A. Russell built his cabin called Red Raven, and this year the number was limited to 100, but by the 1920s it was actually lowered again back down to 75, and that was the number continued on for most of its span. By 1923, large areas had been cleared of brush, the old orchard had been cut out and planted with pines, and the lake had been stocked with brown trout, and most of the larger springs were cleaned out in order to better promote the water. A clubhouse was erected in 1925, and in 1929 a rustic bridge was built of fieldstone and boulders reinforced with concrete to be known as the Russell Memorial Bridge. In 1931 a new front gate was built, which was called the Gillette Gate, after Cleve Gillette. Edward Russell was active in the development of Seven Springs until his death in 1929. Fred Miller then took over as caretaker and continued until 1959, when at 94 he retired, where he eventually passed away a few years later. He was known as the Sage of Seven Springs and had a wide reputation as a weather prophet, basing his prognostications on the bark of numerous trees, the woolly bear caterpillars, and the squirrels' caches of nuts. And after Miller's retirement, Howard Seeley became the custodian. Beginning in 1945, the club began keeping a list of cottages and owners for tax purposes. In 1976, a numbering system was devised. Cottage 1 was the clubhouse, and it went on from there. Numbers continued in order on the lakeside, moving across to the other side, ending with Cottage 20. And then 21 and 22 were located on the main Seven Springs Road, though some didn't even have numbers at all, and some you can still see the original plaques. At some point, they were given Seven Springs Road addresses by the Postal Service, and these addresses began with number 5, while homes on Seven Springs Road began with number 8. And however, this caused a lot of confusion as many of the numbers were the same. So when, for instance, a burglar alarm or some security alarm would go off, police or fire would go to the wrong place. So eventually they had to change the numbering system, and this was based off of 4 main roads. You had Russell Road, Miller Springs Road, Hawkins Hollow Road, and Canty Lane. And the last piece of history dealing with Seven Springs is Seven Springs sparkling water. And this begins when water rights were granted to the original member, Mr. Charles Buxton. He built a pump house that resembled a cabin. The filtered water was sold then to the public. However, the pump house burned down very soon after and was not rebuilt. And then rights transferred to the Batavia Pure Ice and Water Company. In the 1920s, water rights were sold to another member, Mr. William Gamble. Gamble used the water to make soft drinks and advertised a lot about these Seven Springs beverages. He also added chlorine and then water through a series of filters to take out any impurities. John McManus, an employee, said that when he worked for the company in the 1950s, the tanker truck would come every morning and it held 750 gallons, and the tanker truck would fill up and then go off to the plant on Elm Street in order to make soft drinks. And this carried on for quite a few years until Mr. Gamble left that business as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Artifact video series and learned a little bit more about the Seven Springs Country Club here in Genesee County. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to go and check out the rest on our YouTube channel, Holland Land Office Museum. And you can see all of our videos there, not just those on artifacts, but we also have guest speakers and concerts and everything else uploaded there. So be sure to give anything you like a thumbs up, or even subscribe to the channel, as it does help us out a little bit and get you notified even quicker when we do release new material. But as always, the best way to come and learn more about the living history here in Genesee County is to stop by and see us in person. And we'll be happy to show you some of these artifacts up close and personal and tell you even more information. And for those interested in the information we shared on the Seven Springs Country Club, the book written by Mary Ellen Reardon is for sale here in the museum gift shop. So you can be sure to pick up your own copy if this video particularly interests you.